Not long ago, I did something scary AF. I made a major pivot after 13 years of building a successful digital marketing agency. And what nobody tells you about the I quit pivot is this: passion alone will not sustain it. Not if you want traction, not if you want scalability, not if you want peace, and definitely not if you want to stop rebuilding your business every 6 months. This episode is for women over 40 leaving corporate leadership, healthcare, sales, operations, education, consulting, or an executive life to build something of our own, but quietly realizing entrepreneurship is requiring a completely different kind of strategy than she expected, especially if you keep changing your offer. Your content is not fully connecting. Your audience watches but does not convert. You are exhausted from doing all the things, or you're starting to realize that this visibility without structure creates burnout fast. Today, we're talking about why conversions happen before the sale, why nurture has to be measured, why positioning determines traction, why SOPs and metrics matter, and why the businesses that scale are the ones that build operational clarity early. By the end of this episode, I want you to understand something clearly. You probably don't need another offer. You need alignment between your positioning, your audience, your messaging, your metrics, and your systems. Because the I quit pivot has to happen this way. Otherwise, you build yourself right into exhaustion.
One, two, three, four.
Welcome to the Launchpad Pod, Episode 10. The I Quit Pivot has to happen this way. I'm Suzette Cotto, founder of Innovate Launch, a digital marketing strategy and framework for women over 40 leaving corporate careers for entrepreneurship. Let's get into it. Not long ago, I did something scary, something that would white knuckle most tenured and successful business owners. I made a major pivot with my business. After 13 years of running a successful digital marketing agency, I shifted into a completely new direction as the founder of Innovate Launch, a digital marketing strategy and framework for women over 40 leaving corporate careers for entrepreneurship. But let me be very clear about something. I did not abandon anything. I learned from building and running my agency. Quite the opposite. This pivot was about taking decades of real world strategy, marketing, sales systems, digital infrastructure, audience behavior, lead generation, analytics, and business development experience and redirecting it toward a market I deeply believe is underserved: women over 40 leaving corporate careers for entrepreneurship. And I know this market is growing rapidly. Every day, accomplished women are walking away from corporate environments carrying decades of leadership experience, operational expertise, industry knowledge, and professional credibility. But many of them are entering entrepreneurship without the digital marketing positioning, audience building, and business infrastructure strategy needed to create sustainable traction. That is the gap I saw. And I knew the knowledge I built inside my agency model could help fill it. Innovate Launch was never about throwing away my past experience. It was about finally using everything I learned to build something more intentional, more aligned, and more impactful for women who deserve access to strategic business growth knowledge that is often locked behind expensive agencies, elite consulting rooms, or years of trial and error. And that is what we are building together. And if it was not just me taking the leap, my entire team, the same people who helped support and build my agency business for years, went through this giant metamorphosis alongside me. I needed their understanding, their trust, and their buy-in as we evolved from servicing client campaigns into building an entirely new ecosystem, framework, and training model and community. That kind of change is not small. It changes the way you think, the way you operate, the way you measure success, and the way you lead. And let me tell you, the first year of a pivot will humble you. Not because I did not understand KPIs and analytics. I absolutely did. In my corporate life, I helped turn around a $1 billion business in 3 months using measurement, reporting, and performance metrics. What I finally realized was this. I spent years building strategic marketing and sales systems for clients, yet when it came to my own new offer, I was so invested in creating the thing that I had not fully built the measurement system around it. And that was a problem because passion does not replace metrics, purpose does not replace positioning, and more content does not automatically create more traction. The episode of my podcast that received the most views was my I Quit episode. That told me something important. My audience responded to the real story, the identity shift, the corporate exit, the struggle of becoming someone new after being successful as someone else. That mattered. The question that forced me to rethink everything was because what happened next mattered even more. I took a step back and I did a deep dive with my own business strategy coach. Yes, I have one. I don't know everything, and honestly, I think more founders need to say that aloud. During one of our conversations, she kept asking me, "But Suzette, how do you know when you have a conversion?" And here's where I think a lot of entrepreneurs misunderstand marketing. A conversion is not always a sale. So, in fact, most conversions happen long before someone ever buys from you. A conversion can be someone opening your email, someone clicking your link, someone watching your podcast, someone downloading your freebie, someone engaging with your content consistently, someone replying to your newsletter, someone spending time on your website, someone joining your community, and someone moving from cold awareness into trust. Those things matter because marketing is not just about the transaction. It's about the relationship that happens before the transaction. And honestly, this is where I think a lot of businesses get disconnected from what marketing is actually supposed to do. Most business owners only know something is working when money hits the account. Revenue becomes their only measurement. But if you're only measuring revenue, you're missing the entire nurture process that created the sale in the first place. You're missing their customer journey. You're missing behavior patterns and you're missing trust signals. You're missing the moments where people quietly move from closer to making a buying decision. And those moments absolutely need to be measured too, because nurture is not optional. Nurture is strategy. The open rate on an email tells you whether your message is resonating. Engagement tells you whether people feel connected to your content. Website traffic tells you whether curiosity exists. Downloads tell you whether your audience sees value. Replies and conversations tell you whether trust is forming. Those are predictive indicators. Those metrics tell a story before their revenue ever arrives. And once I truly understood that, I realized I needed visibility in the entire relationship building process inside my business, not just the financial outcome at the end. Because if you only pay attention to the sale, you miss everything that created the sale. And positioning is not just branding, but here's what I really came to understand. The relationship comes all the way back to proper positioning and measuring the right things. Because if your positioning is unclear, you attract the wrong audience. You attract the wrong audience, engagement becomes inconsistent. If engagement is inconsistent, trust never fully develops. And if trust never fully develops, conversations struggle long before a sales conversation ever happens. And that is why positioning is not just branding, it's operational. It affects who's scrolling, who opens your emails, who watches your podcast, who joins your community, who responds to your messaging, who trusts your expertise, and ultimately who buys. When the positioning is right, people feel seen. They recognize themselves in your content. They start quietly leaning in long before they ever purchase anything. And that relationship building process has to be measured too, because nurture is measurable. You can measure open rates, click through rates, engagement, watch time, downloads, replies, community growth, conversations, lead source behavior, return visitors, audience retention, lots of metrics. All of those things tell you whether your messaging is connecting emotionally and strategically with the right people. And honestly, this is where I think many entrepreneurs accidentally sabotage themselves. They keep changing the offer before the audience has even had enough time to trust it. Or they change the direction because they're only looking at sales and ignoring the relationship indicators happening before the sale. That is a mistake because sometimes your audience is leaning in before they're buying. Sometimes they are watching quietly, reading everything, opening every email, listening to every episode, trying to decide if they trust you enough to take the next step. And if you're not measuring those interactions, you may think nothing is working, when in reality, the relationship is still being built. Marketing's not just about getting attention, it's about creating alignment between the right audience, the right message, the right positioning, and the right timing. That is where traction actually begins. So, I built SOPs around the pivot. I tightened everything. For those unfamiliar with the term, an SOP is a standard operating procedure. In simple terms, it is a documented process that clearly outlines what needs to happen, who is responsible for it, how it is measured, and what the expected outcome should be. Most small businesses operate from memory, reaction, Slack messages, sticky notes, or I thought someone else handled that. That works until growth starts costing real money. Then confusion becomes expensive. An SOP removes ambiguity. It gives every team member clarity around their responsibilities, timelines, deliverables, reporting expectations, and accountability. It also creates consistency so the business can scale without every decision bottlenecking through the founder. And in my case, that mattered because this was not a small adjustment to my business. This was a full identity shift. And when you're making a pivot of this size, speed, and accuracy matter. I cataloged everything each team member touched that related to the Innovate Launch pivot: content creation, podcast workflows, blog development, lead generation, CRM management, community support, graphics, reporting, social media distribution, analytics tracking, automation support, follow up systems, every moving part. Then I attached real dollar metrics to time, labor, system subscriptions, and resources. Why? Because this is no longer just posting on social media. This is infrastructure. This is investment. This is a business ecosystem being built intentionally from the ground up. And if a team member does not understand why something costs, why it's connected to something, and what the metric matters, They will never fully understand the weight of what the founder is carrying. Once the SOPs were completed, I rolled them out individually in one on one meetings with every team member. We reviewed expectations together. We reviewed metrics together. We reviewed ownership together. I explained that I needed to see from them and why it mattered. Not because I wanted control, because I needed visibility. I needed to know what content people were responding to, what platforms were converting, what systems were breaking, what tasks were wasting time, what activities were producing ROI, what audience behavior was telling us. I did not need activity for the sake of activity. I needed measurable traction. And that changes the entire culture of a business because now the team understands that we're not just posting. We are building measurable ecosystem designed to attract, nurture, convert, and support women entrepreneurs over 40 leaving corporate careers for entrepreneurship. Every action should connect to a purpose. Every task should connect to a metric. Every metric should tell a story. And maybe you don't even have a full team yet. Maybe it's just you and a VA. Start anyway. Create the metrics now. Track now. Document now. Build the systems now. Because when growth comes, you do not want to build while you're overwhelmed and exhausted. You want repeatable systems already in place. That is power. That is scalability. And that is how businesses stop operating like survival mode side hustles and start functioning like real companies. Metrics create ownership. And concurrently, every one of my team members is being set up for success, not just for the role they have today, but for the role they will grow into as this company expands, because growth is coming. And when it does, I do not want a team full of task doers waiting for instructions. I want leaders. I want managers. I want people who understand the business, the mission, the metrics, and the movement. That level of buy-in has to run deep. I needed my team to understand that this was not just my investment. This was their investment too. They're helping build something that is growing in real time. And the more visibility they have into what drives success, the more ownership they naturally take over the outcome. Very few companies give team members insight into metrics at a lower operational level. And honestly, I think that's a massive mistake. People are out there doing the things every single day without understanding what success even looks like. No scoreboard, no visibility, no measurable wins, no context. What professional sports team in the world leaves score out of the game? None. Because the scoreboard creates focus, it creates accountability, it creates motivation, it creates momentum. Players know where they stand, they know where they are winning, they know where they need to improve, they know what matters. Business should operate the same way. When metrics are hidden from the people responsible for execution, team members end up disconnected from impact. They complete tasks without understanding how those tasks contribute to growth, revenue, audience engagement, conversions, retention, or operational success. That is dangerous for scaling companies. People need to know what matters. They need to know what actually created results, what content people responded to, what generated leads, what converted into sales, what wasted time and resources, what is worth repeating, what is not worth doing again. Those are not just founder conversations. Those are growth conversations. And the earlier you build a culture around measurement, visibility, ownership, and accountability, the easier it becomes to scale without chaos later. These are basics. But ironically, they're the exact basics many growing companies overlook while chasing more complicated strategies. The mistake I see entrepreneurs make over and over, and while all of this operational work was happening behind the scenes, I was also honing my positioning again. A year ago, I went from saying I help new business entrepreneurs to saying I help women entrepreneurs over 40 leaving corporate jobs for entrepreneurship. That was better, but better's not always finished. I wanted my audience to see themselves in the mirror when I said who my framework was for. I spoke directly to the women entrepreneur over 40 who had been in business less than 3 years. She might have been making 150,000, 300,000, even up to $1 million a year, but the business still felt heavy. Sales were inconsistent, systems were unsustainable. There was not a single task she could fully delegate without being pulled back into it. She was working harder than she ever worked in corporate. That changed her offer more than once because it was not getting the traction she wanted. She bought another course, joined another mastermind, downloaded another template, watched another expert explain what worked for them. But here was the issue. At this stage, emulation and ideation were not the answer. If you already have a product, service, offer, or body of work that you know has value, creating something else or adding more whistles and bells is not the answer. The question is, does what you built match what your audience believes they need? That is positioning. So, why is it positioning comes before traction? Well, this is why I created a positioning exercise inside the launch training. Because when your positioning is too broad, your audience does not click. They may like you, they may follow you, they may even cheer you on, but that does not mean that they buy because they do not recognize the solution as theirs. And let's be honest, constant change confuses people. I've watched startups change their name, change who their product is for, redo the website, shift the content, change the offer, and then wonder why engagement drops. Your audience can't build trust with a moving target. You must build in stages. You must have a plan. You must stick to a plan long enough to measure it. Tweaks come from metrics and analytics, not panic. If something is not working, measure it. If something is working, talk about it in 50 different ways. That's how you build traction. That is also why launch is not just a one off training, it's a digital ecosystem. The training matters, the framework matters, the implementation matters, but the community matters too. Inside the Launch VIP community, women are walking the same road together. They're building after corporate. They are refining offers. They are learning how to create visibility, structure, list growth, content, email, and sales systems without burning themselves to the ground. This first year of my pivot taught me that corporate success does not automatically prepare you for entrepreneurial clarity, but it does give you discipline. And now I know exactly how to use that discipline to help both of us win. If your offer is not getting the traction you expected, do not start by creating another one. Start with positioning. Download the free positioning exercise in the podcast description. It will help you clarify what you're building for, what problem you solve, and how to say it in a way that makes the right woman stop and think, hey, that's me. Because more does not mean better. Clear means better. Measurement means better. Positioned means better. If this episode resonated with you, I really want you to hear me when I say this. You're probably closer than you think. But closeness without structure creates confusion, and confusion creates constant pivoting, and constant pivoting destroys traction. You do not need to reinvent yourself every time something is not immediately converting. You need clearer positioning, better measurement, more intentional nurture, and systems that allow your business to scale without everything depending on your exhaustion. That is the work we're doing inside Innovate Launch. Be sure to download the free positioning exercise linked in the podcast description because it is one of the most important exercises I teach inside the framework. When your audience sees themselves clearly in your messaging, everything changes. And if you're building after corporate and want more conversations around strategy, visibility, positioning, audience growth, infrastructure, AI shifts, entrepreneurship, and building a business with intention, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time a new episode of the Launchpad Pod drops. And if this episode helped you, share it with another woman entrepreneur who is trying to navigate her own pivot right now. You're not starting over. You're building from experience now, and that changes everything. I'm Suzette, and I see you, I support you, and I want you to be successful. So I'll see you on the inside. Take care.
What